Today we're going to be talking about the value of diversity, and I want to thank all of our panel members for joining me in the discussion today. We're going to have a round table, despite not having a table and it not being round, but this is just an open discussion that we're going to be having, and I'm just going to briefly introduce our panel members. Zahid Malik is a principal lawyer at Zahid Malik Law Office, and his practice focuses primarily on immigration law, but he does, among other things, real estate law as well. Kyla Lee is joining us from beautiful British Columbia, and she is a criminal defense attorney. She's a partner at Acumen Law. So welcome, Kyla. Alia Besharat is an associate at Monkhouse Law, and her practice is primarily employment law. Welcome, Alia. And Mijares is a principal lawyer at Mijares Law, and her practice focuses primarily on real estate and corporate law. So thank you to all of you for agreeing to be on the panel today and for speaking about this topic. I just want to start with a report I came across the other day when I was researching this topic. And the report was issued by a Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion. It's called the CCDI. And they did a study. I think they started their study back in 2014, and it was a study over a 3-year period of the legal profession, specifically diversity in the legal profession. And this is a longitudinal study, so it's done over a few years, and it's a multi-state study. And they looked at different aspects of the legal profession. They looked at lawyers who are employed in private practice in private law firms. They looked at sole practitioners, students at law, and licensees who are practicing in in-house counsel roles as well as other legal roles. And I wanted to highlight just a couple of the findings, and maybe we'll start our conversation based on these findings. So in 2014, 15, 16, these are the 3 years that they looked at. And of course, these are, the numbers are based on the respondents who replied. So there are a number of law firms that they reached out to, sole practitioners, in-house counsel. And based on the responses, somewhere between 74 to 76.86% of people in senior leadership roles were male in the legal profession. And in the same time period, between 88.9% to 90.78% of people in senior leadership roles were Caucasian. Additional stats, over the same period of time, Aboriginal respondents, as well as persons with disabilities, were underrepresented in the legal profession. And that's in comparison to looking at the global Canadian labor force data that's available. But at the same time, people, or Aboriginal people, as well as persons with disabilities, did not find that they were facing barriers when it came to advancement in the legal profession, despite their underrepresentation. And another stat from the same report, so over this 3-year period, women and racialized respondents are also underrepresented in the profession as compared with the Canadian labor force. Now, of course, there are many, factors that play in, to explain the results of this data, and the study did not go into the reasons, for the results. But looking at it from an equity perspective, or at least what equity means to me, and perhaps this is a definition we can all agree with at a minimum, that equality means at least the equality of opportunity to enter into the legal profession. And over the last, I would say it's almost a decade, maybe for the last 9 years, I've worked in the legal education and consulting industry. And I've personally worked with about 2,000 licensing candidates who are foreign-trained lawyers, predominantly foreign-trained lawyers, whether they are Canadians who had studied abroad or new immigrants to this country that are going through the licensing process. And there are many success stories with the people I've worked with. I've worked with to date over 2,000 licensing candidates from over 60 countries, and there are many success stories. But something is common among these stories, and that is that these individuals face significant barriers that are perhaps not faced by other people entering the legal profession. And so, what I'd like to do today is we've got a panel of diverse lawyers who are practicing, and I want to hear their stories. I want them to share their stories with you today, so perhaps we can learn something new. We can learn a different perspective. We can also put ourselves in their shoes for a moment, because unless you hear the other side, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what those barriers are unless you're open to listening. So I'm hoping we can do that today. I'm also hoping we can, discuss some of the ways forward and some ways we can perhaps improve the profession. I welcome questions from the audience. You can pose questions to any of us or to the entire panel if you like, but the questions have to be focused on the topic of discussion today, which is diversity. And so I'd like to perhaps start with Laura. And Laura, if you don't mind, just telling us a little bit of your story, where you came from, where you studied law, and if you could tell us, perhaps, what was the most difficult thing you found about becoming a lawyer in Canada after all of that, after you get into your story?
Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me. And thank you, everyone, for their attention. I am Laura Mijares, and I was born in Mexico City. I became a lawyer in Mexico in about 2000. I finished law school, and then I needed to prepare a thesis and a process exams. So I finally got my license in about 2002. But I decided to come and live here in Canada with my family, young family. I had just got married, and we have a daughter, 1 year old. And we decided to basically leave everything behind and just come and try to get a better life here, mainly for our children. And but then, I was very conscious right from the beginning that I was going to face the challenge of reinvent myself here or get qualified and be able to practice law. When I arrived here, the first thing I remember I did was I went to Acumen Law School, and I made some inquiries about what process. Immediately they said, first of all, you are a mature student, so there's very few spaces if you want to register here as a student. There's exams that you have to write. So check if you can take advantage of this program, the National Committee of Accreditation program. And that's when I started the journey of doing some more research and then try to find the more efficient way to get my accreditation. Well, coming from Mexico, it's we are under a civil law system, which also adds a little bit more of a challenge because I was trying to incorporate myself into a common law system. And in order to take advantage of different avenues to get accredited, that was the first thing that I needed to sort it out. How is that I was going to jump the first hoop? The first thing I did after trying other ways, as maybe thinking if I could do something in finance and not to go back to school. So I decided to sign up for a master program at U of T. And I did my Master of Laws. Challenge as well was trying to cope family with work, with studying full time, trying to have an income during that time, because I couldn't just think about only myself and devote everything to the study. So I was trying to manage work as well. And after I finished my master's degree, that was full time. Then it's when I was able to start my process in the NCA. The same thing when I was in U of T, I tried to sign up for as many courses as we were allowed, trying to save on spending time in the exams, the NCA exams. It was difficult because at that time we were not allowed to sign up for first year courses. So that was something that I needed to. For example, I remember I signed up for what was advanced torts, and they still asked me to write the torts exam, although my
The
thesis
NCA,
was also the NCA.
Right.
Exactly. So, but you know what? Once I finished that, then I was able to just do my NCA exams, about like 7 or 8 courses, which you were very supportive, and I really appreciated what you did and how is that you helped me. So that was great. And yes, and then that was really my path to accreditation. Of course, in the meantime, I tried to get as much experience as I could, and I started working as a legal assistant in a real estate law firm. And then after that, that was a small office. And then I was able to get a job in a big firm in downtown Toronto. And so that gave me another side of experience, the commercial real estate. And although it wasn't really like my passion, I found that it was an area that I enjoyed, that I was learning a lot, and it opened up my opportunities then to open up my practice as a real estate lawyer. So that's basically the fast track of my challenge. Wow. So let me know if you have any questions, because there's a lot of other little experiences here and there.
No, I think that's a real eye opener. Is that when you're coming to Canada, you're not just, I mean, usually you're a mature student at this point, you're coming with a family, you're coming with children, and you also have to find a way to support yourself and study at the same time. And that is, it's a bit of an uphill battle. It's difficult, right? I did my master's, I went to a similar program, and I remember, hey, this is not the same as when I was 20. I'm not able to memorize things as well. And you know, just studying is very different. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask, you know, how did you find practicing civil law as compared to practicing perhaps common law, or maybe not even practice, at least as a student, perhaps from that perspective? Did you find differences?
Yes, it's at the when I was in U of T, when I was in the master's program, the first semester was very challenging because my mentality, like the way my brain was trained in law school, it's different. We're very heavily codified, and the critical thinking, it was there, I think, at some point, but then it was an eye opener to see when the first time they talk about equity. I said, well, what is that, right? The courts of equity. And then critical thinking as to analyzing when you can swear that you have the right answer on you're looking at acts. Where are the acts here? Where are the statutes? Well, that's not how it works here. The concept will be very similar, and I had no problem with that. But I really appreciated the change in the system and the approach. How is that questions were answered during the exams? I remember that someone said it's not right or wrong. Just take a position and then defend it. Right? That was very. It was a very enriching experience. I really like it, but it was a challenge. So the second semester it was much better. Second semester, I was feeling more confident when I was doing my reasoning, and I started enjoying it more, because at the beginning it was, you know, like, I don't know, it's not failure after failure, but it was a little bit of disappointment, right? Until I got myself a little bit more trained and comfortable with the system and also the way of teaching. So that was for academic purposes, that was an eye opener too.
Right. So that's another challenge, I guess, moving from a civil system to a common system. And learning that. And I'm sure in law school, at least at the master's level, they don't have that focus. You're coming from a civil system. This is how you have to do things. There isn't a particular course on that. They just expect you to know it. You're at the master's level now.
Yes.
So I'm sure you had to probably have private discussions with professors, perhaps.
Oh yes, yeah. And they were very supportive. I think that I was very lucky to have great professors, which they enjoy to have foreign trained lawyers in their classes, and they're very respectful. They like that exchange. Particularly, I think was advanced contracts, and there was another student, a French student, myself, and he will always ask us, okay, what about your system? How will you handle this, right? What type of status you have? How is that this is contemplated in the law? So that was amazing. I felt it was very dignified to be able to be part of those discussions. Plus, everybody was much younger than the French and myself, but it was great. I appreciate that they open up and they guide me through that too.
I wanted to ask if there was a particular challenge or maybe a disappointment you may have had when trying to break into the legal profession. Is there any particular experience, either on the job or something that you could speak to?
Yes, and it's very. I'm going to talk about experience that I have. I remember I said that I had the opportunity to work in a big downtown law firm. And I started working in a short group as a legal assistant. We had 5 lawyers and 2 assistants. So we're really busy. And everybody had different needs. So we just tried to please them all. And I think we did. We're working very comfortable. As when they knew that I was I was pursuing my accreditation, they were very happy. They came, they congratulated me. They actually told more lawyers about what I was doing. And they were always very supportive. However, once I was really close to finish my NCA exams and start my licensing process. I came after my master's. I came back and worked with them again.
How long have you been with them?
So in total, I think was over 4 years.
Okay.
Over 4 years, and I was working with senior associates, partners, and equity partners. It's the real estate. It wasn't that like a huge department in the firm, but so we all knew each other very well. And then I asked not directly to my bosses, but to the department that was in charge of the summer student positions and the articling positions, and I asked them if there was an opportunity for me, because I would like to be considered for an articling position. And they just said, no. Now, it's important to say that it wasn't the person the person that I was working for. It was the person who was in charge of the program. Not a lawyer, by the way, more of a human resources. But they said no, because the policy is that if you are not a summer student, then you cannot be considered for an articling position. And I was very disappointed, and I was at some point upset because I said, well, I served you guys for all these years, and you were always very happy and very pleased with me. And now that I'm doing something for myself and to get to maybe like you guys, why is that I don't have the support? But yes, so I decided to leave and I look for something else. Things happen for a reason, because I applied to York region and I did my article in the region, which opened up another set of opportunities, right? I was able to have a much richer rotation, construction and employment law and litigation and real estate and municipal. So that courts, that also was a very good experience. So, at the end, I'm satisfied, but I was disappointed that the system was so strict that they were not willing to give us an opportunity, right? Although all the hard work that we were doing, I felt that it was just privilege for whoever had been in the system like for much earlier than us, right? So.
Right. And that's an important thing to highlight. I think people don't appreciate that you really have to be into the system And I've said this in the last session that we had a couple of weeks ago, where Canada is an incredibly welcoming country to new immigrants, and then we look at the profession, and the profession says we're doing a lot to be inclusive, but policies like this are not very inclusive, because you leave out foreign trained lawyers, for example, experienced professionals. You had practice already in Mexico, you were a practicing lawyer, and you'd been working at this firm for X number of years already. They like you, everything's great. We can't help you though, sorry, you're out of the system.
And let me tell you, it's in the region I had a totally different experience, because I started working as a legal assistant for about 2.5 years, and then it's when finally I something like that, when articling positions open up, like, or at least available to me, and I had all my requirements ready. I did all my interview process with everybody else, right? And it was great, but at least I appreciate that at least we had the opportunity to do it. I was able to run in the same race as everybody else. Rather than when I was, what happened in downtown, it was different. It's like you don't have opportunity to go and participate in the race.
Right.
So in terms of equality, as you said, just to be open to the opportunity, that would be
right. Nice. Right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you. Would anybody else would like to go next and just share your story, where you came from, and then we'll throw some questions at you. All right, I'll just pick somebody. Kyla, would you like to go next?
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. So I am a criminal lawyer. I practice in Vancouver. I went to law school in Canada, but my experience was different to some extent from most people going to law school, because I didn't apply as an ordinary student. I'm Métis, and I applied as an Indigenous student. So there were different application requirements, different considerations. The LSAT score wasn't taken into account. And so in that way, although it's not, I end up with the same law degree, I was admitted under sort of different considerations than other people. And I did feel stigma associated to that. While I was in school, people would find out that I'm Indigenous, and obviously I passed. So the conversation never came up with lots of people. But when they did find out, there was always this, like I didn't belong there amongst everybody else because of having gone through this other path where I didn't, have to perform well on the LSAT, or I didn't have to do some of the things that they did to get in. So I'm sure everybody on this panel has also experienced the moment where you're made to feel less than because you took a different route to get to the same position. And still, all of us ultimately have demonstrated the same competences as far as licensing. We've all graduated a law school, and it's not like any law school is easy. They're all hard, regardless of where in the world they are. So that's sort of the journey that I've taken. I'm now doing most of the hiring for the firm that I work at. And so I often deal with people who are applying, who have gone through the NCA process and are foreign trained lawyers. And so, my perspective as well, I'm able to bring sort of my views as somebody who's hired a lot of articling students who have come through NCA. One of our current students did his law degree in England. We've had ones from Bond University in Australia, and all of them at the end of their articling are just as good and just as effective and just as smart as any of the law students we've hired. In some cases, smarter and more effective than some of the law students that we've hired from Canadian law schools. So, if there's anybody listening today that's thinking, is there a difference in the quality of candidate and the quality of work you're getting out of somebody that's a foreign trained lawyer? No, at the end of the day, we're all smart enough to have gotten a law degree. We're all smart enough to have been qualified in a jurisdiction. And when you're articling, you start on day one knowing nothing, and you end on day 365 knowing almost nothing. So it's the same.
Right. As an employer who is hiring, I mean, it's great to hear that you are considering and you have hired NCA candidates. What considerations went into that process? Why did you decide to even consider NCA candidates? And I ask this because many firms in Ontario will specifically say you need to have a Canadian JD in their, job application. And it's very common in Ontario, at least. I don't know how the BC market is, but is there anything, perhaps any personal experiences that went into those considerations, or is it just natural for you to consider all applicants?
I mean, for us, it was sort of natural to consider all applicants because we're a small firm. We don't participate in the OCI process or the large firm recruitment processes. We don't get 600 applications from across Canada on top of everybody from outside of Canada. So we have a much smaller pool of applicants to choose from, although I wouldn't, even if we had 600 applications, that wouldn't be the determining factor for me. I think for us, because we're a small firm, because we all work in close proximity and work closely on files, we're just trying to find someone that we can get along with, that has a good sense of humor and has good life experiences that we can talk about. And I actually like the NCA candidates for that, because you have somebody who's come from a different background, and so you get all these fresh perspectives and new ideas and interesting things to talk about from having lived in different countries. And so I think at a small firm, maybe the differences between getting a job with having a foreign degree versus a Canadian degree are probably less. So if people are worried about the process, direct your inquiries to small firms.
Oh. And remember, anyone online, you can use the comment sections to ask questions as well. I think they're open to questions. All our panel members are. Kyla, I'm wondering, the history with the Métis people in Canada, at least the Métis people, as I understood, have been excluded from a lot of negotiations, discussions, treaties with the governments until very recent history, where they made some landmark progress, I'd say at the Supreme Court level. Has any of this shaped your own personal experience of what it means to be inclusive?
Absolutely. I mean, I think all of our personal experiences define us, but as a Métis person and being, I always view myself as being sort of one foot in one world and one foot in the other world, where I'm Indigenous, but I don't look Indigenous. So I occupy both spaces at the same time. And it gives me lots of privilege, but it also puts me in positions where I hear the types of things that people say about Indigenous people, or even about Métis people, because nobody knows by looking at me. There's even within the Indigenous community this, less than attitude amongst a lot of people towards Métis, suggestions that we should be silent on Indigenous issues because of the privilege that some Métis people get by passing, even though we have lots of not having privilege because we don't have land, we don't have treaty rights, and we don't have all sorts of things. So that, I think, has really shaped my perspective when I'm looking at people who are coming from positions of marginalization and disadvantage, who are occupying different worlds. To me, I'm looking at those people and I see reflections of my own experience in that. And it's like a common ground that I have with those individuals.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Perhaps, Zahid, you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Give me the opportunity. I'm Zahid Malik. I'm still law graduate from Pakistan. I finished my last studies Sorry, I can't hear you.
I was going to say, your microphone is a little bit muffled. You're covering it.
All the time?
It's okay. I think we can make it. Go ahead.
I finished my last studies in overseas from Pakistan. And then,
We can hear you, but it's a little bit muffled. I'm not sure if you have maybe another way to log in from a different device, and you can mute this device. And in the meantime, we'll speak with Alia, if you can try, perhaps, or just perhaps restart, and perhaps that'll clear up the microphone sound. Okay. So Alia, we'll go to you in the meantime, because okay. Hey, Alia.
Hi. So thanks, Liran, for having me and to the network. I appreciate it. To tell you a bit about my background, I feel like it's a little less diverse than some of the past present panelists and those on today. But I am from Toronto originally, and I did my undergrad here, and then I went to the UK. I went to the University of Leicester for my law degree. And I had gone there with the intention of coming back to Canada. So my intention was not to stay there or practice. It was to come back and follow in the footsteps of many Canadians like myself, and go through the NCA or do the NCA route rather than doing a master's, which was relatively new at the time. And so I had kind of just gone with everybody else and decided to write the exams. After I finished the NCA exams, I articled at a family law firm because I actually had previous experience in real estate and immigration, and I wanted to try my hand at litigation. Of course, articles are few and far between, whether you went to law school in Ontario or Canada or wherever you went to law school. It's a very competitive market in all of Canada, especially in the major cities. So I took the position at a boutique family law firm. And the perks of working at a small firm is that you get some really, really hands-on experience. There are 3 associates, and I was in court often. I attended motions. I observed trial. And then when I was called to the bar, I wasn't hired back, so I had to look for work. And I ended up at a smaller firm, but larger than my articles. And it was about 10 lawyers. It was a general civil litigation and family firm. And then right now I'm currently found my way at Monkhouse Law in Toronto, and I'm practicing employment and human rights law. So I'm still in litigation. I'm really glad that I was able to try my hand at litigation, because it ended up being somewhere where I did want to be, and landing in employment specifically. Especially right now, given that there are so many terminations at the moment, we are quite busy, and I am quite grateful. So that's the long and the short of it.
I'm sure there's more to it. So let me pick your brain a bit. Leicester is a very popular school. So there are, from my understanding, anywhere from around 250 Canadians in any given year in the school. So that's pretty big.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what's one of the best experiences you had in the UK that you think have made you, I don't know if you could say made you a better lawyer, but sure. Anything that you're really grateful for that happened in the UK that you've brought with you back here?
Just the opportunity in itself to study in a different country, especially given that I have, I was born and raised in Toronto, and I went to Canadian university. So to be able to experience the British system, which is different than our education system, And to live in the UK and to live in another city and to see different people from different walks of life, and it actually, what I will say is it gave me a greater appreciation for being Canadian, and just the fact that we are very welcoming. We are much more welcoming, I would say, in a way. But overall, I couldn't pinpoint one particular experience. I will say the opportunity for me to have studied in the UK and have traveled at the same time, I think gives me greater perspective. And again, that appreciation for being Canadian, for being from such a multicultural city, I think it plays into my everyday life. So it's not just work, but it's just being able to speak to people from different walks of life and to be able to relate to them.
Yeah, wonderful. Is there any major hurdles you felt you experienced in when you came back home and trying to get licensed, and maybe through the licensing process or trying to find articles? Because I know you've done all that already and you're a successful lawyer now, but were there any hardships along the way? Anybody?
Yeah, there definitely were. It was a lot of the unknown, although there were a lot of Canadians that came back, and that's the reason why I chose Leicester, was because they were basically grooming and breeding Canadians to come back into the Canadian, and they were moving into the Canadian market pretty seamlessly. So that's why I did that. However, doing the NCA route, I mean, Liran, that's how I met Liran, was through taking his courses. And for someone like myself, you can't just give me a book and a syllabus and then I'll be able to write the exam. I needed somebody to, go over the major themes and go over the materials with me. And that's how I was able to pass that hurdle. And then moving forward, so like every step of the way, it was like hurdle after hurdle, but in a different way. So the NCAs were difficult in themselves, especially because you're trying to also get Canadian experience. Even as law students, right? We
You mean while you're studying at the same time?
Yeah. So you're trying to get some experience. I was told that even for articles, I was told that you don't have any litigation experience, so we're not going to hire you, which is, for a student, how much experience can a student truly have? It's not realistic to say that to somebody who's in, second year or third year, like looking for articles. So what I will say was, like, just some advice. I know, just keep at it. Don't lose hope. I do think it's a great profession, and you just really got to expand your network. So that's what I tried to do in terms of trying to secure articles. I knew that after the NCAs, that was my next step. So I had that in the back of my mind. I joined the OBA, which is the Ontario Bar Association. I joined Young Women in Law. I joined the Young Advocates Society. I attended events. I attended CPDs. When you're a student, even as an NCA or articling student, those memberships are usually free, or it may be a small fee, but I definitely think there's a return on your investment, even if it is $100 for the membership, because you are expanding your network if you don't already have a network of lawyers and or people that have worked in law firms, because you do need that foot in the door. And I know it's difficult for Canadian law students, but it's even more difficult for those who are foreign trained. But you have to make your own path and put yourself out there and be genuine. So the amount of, when we could do informational coffee dates, or just cold emails, you got to be very, you got to be very succinct when you're talking to a lawyer. I know it's intimidating. You want to be succinct, but you want to be personable. You don't want to don't waste their time. I know that sounds very crass, but really, if you have a coffee for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, you don't want them you want to leave feeling like, okay, they're happy with me and they're impressed by me. So just be genuine, be yourself, but also, be yourself. That's really the best kind of advice that I have. And I think that's what I did. And that's how I landed articles and my associate positions were through networking.
Okay, that's great, great advice to people who are just starting out the process. Zahid, can we try your microphone again and see if it's any better?
I think now it should be okay.
I think it's better. Yes. So,
yeah. Finally, I got it. Yeah, thank you so much, Liran, for giving me the opportunity. I did my law graduation from Pakistan back in 2003. And for the initial couple of years, I did my practice as an independent lawyer there, which was part of my licensing process as well there. Then after that, I joined a regulatory body back home in Pakistan in 2006, 7, 8 around. And till coming to Canada, like in 2016, I actually moved to Canada in 2016. So I was heading the law department in that media regulatory body. So it was kind of a mixed role for me as in-house counsel, as well as I had to appear before the courts on behalf of the department. So it was a mixed match of in-house counseling and also the court proceedings. I landed in Canada in 2016 September, I remember that. And that was the start of my licensing process here in Canada as well, because I came here with the mind that only profession which actually suits me is to become a lawyer. Definitely it was, too much was unknown to me, because I didn't know about how the NCA works, what stages I have to cover, but that was the start of my process. I was assigned 5 subjects, and that became a reason to come closer and first interaction with you, Mr. Alia, and that was a wonderful experience. The first orientation, the first information, the first education for me was actually through you. I attended your class, and that was the actual challenge for me was actually during the NCA. It was actually from de-learning to relearning, kind of. Like the system in Pakistan is a different system, but far different than Canadian system, because we are only asked about what the law is. But here in Canada, how the law is applied. So it's a shift from what the law is, how to apply that law. So how is the actual that's the main distance that we have to overcome, particularly belonging to the South Asian community. So from de-learning to relearning was the difficult challenge for us. But it was a wonderful journey. I took my 2 exams in January 2017, and then remaining 3 I took in May 2017 and finished the NCA process in like 4 or 5 months process. Then there started the actual challenge for anybody, like for me, like getting the articling, then getting the practical exposure. I was lucky enough, fortunate enough that I got a job at a law office by submitting my resume through social media and all that. I ultimately, initially I got an articling, as a volunteer position, which was 1 hour distance from my home all the way to Scarborough. I grabbed that opportunity because I was hungry about it, honestly. That was the first day when I was allowed to enter into a lawyer's office as part of their team. So I worked there for almost a couple of months, and that became actually a stepping stone for me to get a regular job in Mississauga right now, where actually I'm practicing as well. So I would suggest that whatever opportunity you can, as a student, as an articling student, as an aspirant licensing individual, grab it. Forget about the distance. You have to do the lots of compromises. You have to have the money to run your affairs, because we as South Asian with the particular community, we come with this particular set of challenges. Like the most important thing is language is a very big barrier for us. We come here, we have to educate ourselves. We have to get the trust and the confidence in ourselves that, okay, language is no more a barrier for me. And then to the fear factor, because in Pakistan, the practice is altogether different. In Canada, that there's actually the confidentiality, the relationship with the client, and all that stuff. Lawyers usually don't trust anybody other than themselves to allow them to interact with their clients, and because we as lawyers are under immense professional responsibility to ensure the confidentiality and the cliental relationship between us and our clients. So that can be a reason why the lawyers, as a licensed lawyers, are reluctant to allow anybody, in particular a student, to come in and join there as a team. But this is how we have to match that. Well, for the articling requirement, again, I said that I was lucky enough that to get the exemption from the articling, because I had experience of around 10, 12 years from back home. And also I had the experience of working at a law firm in Canada as well. So I consider myself lucky to get exempted. And yes.
Can you talk about that for a moment? Because I'm not sure everybody is aware that there is a possibility to have your articles abridged or exempted entirely. What does that mean?
Yes, thank you. Actually, the Law Society gives us an option if we have experience of at least 1 year or more as a practicing lawyer with a certain set of responsibilities. If we can satisfy the Law Society by submitting the particular requirement, like two at least references and all of your profile, if that meets with the requirements what the Law Society is expecting us to meet with through articling, the Law Society can grant us the exemption. It is actually very common for us to apply because most of the lawyers are international trained lawyers. So once we say the trained lawyers, so minimum experience is always with all of us of 1 year. So if you are brave enough, if you can trust yourself, you can, if you submit your case to the Law Society, the articling requirement can be exempted, and then there is a 3 days course for as a replacement of that. I don't remember the exact name for that. I'm sorry for that. But that's actually an alternate to that. So that way you can just shorten your whole licensing process as well. As I did for myself, as I told, I completed my NCE in July. I got my final results for the NCE in July 2017. And by the end of July 2018, I had finished my barrister and solicitor exams as well. So within a span of almost 16, 17 months, I could manage, I could qualify to become, and finally I was called to the bar in September 2018. So since then, I'm in practice. To be very honest, like Laura and Kyla, the amount of challenges they had to face, I don't think that I had to face. Though I was also an immigrant, London immigrant. But honestly speaking, to be very honest, Canada is very welcoming for all of us as immigrants. Equal opportunities. We said that equity, that opportunity of quality of opportunity. I am very much like of the view that yes, Canada is really an open and welcoming country for all of us. The problem is, as early as possible, we can adjust ourselves and adapt ourselves to the requirements of this land. Licensing is not that horrible process what the people initially think, because I also thought that it's going to be a very horrible process, but actually it is so conducive, it's so adaptable for us if we can manage to adapt ourselves into this system.
There's a question that came through, related to what Zahid just mentioned, and I think any of you could answer this. The person asked, would you guys suggest trying to get articles or applying for the exemption for articles? Having gone through the NCA process, I'm unable to even find a job remotely related to law. I get the impression that firms here do not entertain applications with foreign law degrees. While articles could open opportunities, I do not want to waste time sending out countless applications. I think we'll get a few of you maybe to comment on this. Do you think it's worth getting exempt, or should you do your articles?
I can.
I
just want to speak to just one thing. Or a piece of advice. Really, it depends on if they have practical experience or not, right? So someone like myself, I didn't practice for 10 years in another country. You know, I barely had real life work experience. So I wanted to do, you know, to article the way I wanted to do things the normal course. After I wrote my NCAs, I personally chose to article and get that experience and that exposure to the law because I didn't have it. So obviously it depends on the situation. But one other thing, if they're having trouble securing articles, you know, don't just apply for posted positions. So in fact, don't apply for posted positions. Create positions. So reach out, cold calling, cold emailing, look at the small firms, go on Google Maps and look to see what firms are in a certain building or what firms, you know, if you want to practice criminal law, get a list of the, you know, the criminal law firms in whatever city or you're in and reach out to people. Or if you see a foreign grad, say, hi, I also went to school, you know, in the UK or whatnot. Do you mind? Can we have a coffee? And then you never know what opportunity will come about. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but you use that opportunity and you leverage that opportunity. You know, one day down the line, the community in the bar within each city is quite small.
I agree with that. Laura, were you going to comment on this as well?
Well, I enjoy very much my articles. So I will say try to get that experience, right? Particularly if you have an opportunity of having or be exposed to different areas. I think it will also be good if you are not sure about what you want to do. But on the other hand, as Zahid said, don't see it as an impossible challenge to meet. If not, then even if you think that you meet the requirements to maybe get exempted, so why not, right? But I'll say if you have the opportunity and you can look for the opportunity, just take it. In my case, was great. I don't think that I would have had exposure to these other areas of law if it wouldn't be because of my articles, right? And then you decide what you can do, or you know, life will take you to that path or the other one. But if not, then well, you know what? Just see if you can start practicing right away. I mean, practice wouldn't hurt, right? That's what I mean. It's also because you are also going to learn from other lawyers. Just you know, behavior in the profession. How is that you do camaraderie with another lawyers too? So it's not only the specific practice concrete. There's also other things that you can learn from that.
Thank experience. You. Ontario does have other options. Ontario is actually quite flexible when it comes to the articling experience. I would juxtapose that with BC, and I'll talk about BC in a moment. But I personally articled. I don't know if you call it articling, but I was practicing law in New York because I was a qualified lawyer in New York. And while I was there, I said I may as well do my Ontario articles because so I applied for international articles, and I got my boss at the law firm I was working to say that he was supervising my work, which in any case he was supervising. I was a junior lawyer, but I did manage to do my articles in New York. For Ontario. BC is special because although you can get an abridgment, the minimum articling period for anyone, no matter what your experience is 4 months. So no matter what, and no matter how many years of practice you have, you cannot abridge more than or up to 4 months. So you will have to do your 4 months articling. And, you know, Kyla and I spoke about that. I see that as being a barrier for many people, particularly people with disabilities. And I spoke about a student I had worked with many moons ago, and she had been a qualified lawyer in 2 U.S. states, including the California bar, which is one of the hardest bars. And she'd been practicing law for over 20 years. And she just moved to British Columbia, and now she has to find an articling position for 4 months, and she has to find a firm that's willing to let her work from home. And this is not even, we don't even have COVID yet, right? And you know, she she needs an assistant to work with, and this is very difficult for somebody because she's legally blind. Sorry, I forgot to mention. She was legally blind. So I think it's incredibly challenging for certain individuals, particularly, the case that I gave, somebody with disabilities. That's a big barrier that I think needs to change in places like BC, to account for those differences. There was a question that Armand asked the panel, and I'd love to hear your take on it if anyone's experienced this. Armand asks, has anyone here experienced discrimination in courtroom environment or felt a semblance of it?
From my experience as somebody who went through the Indigenous admissions process, I haven't felt any discrimination in the sense of like no judge or clerk or opposing counsel in the courtrooms ever questioned me about how I got into law school and whether that affected my right to be there. I have felt discriminated against as an Indigenous person in the courtroom. And again, like, because I pass, having to hear things that wouldn't be said if people knew, or things that are very stereotypical of Indigenous people, and bearing witness to that in the courtroom. Certainly, I've been through that, but I haven't felt any type of discrimination because of being somebody who became a lawyer through the Indigenous application process rather than through the regular
so
stream.
You've heard comments about Indigenous people, but they didn't know you were Indigenous. It was indirect, kind of backhand there. Oh.
Yeah.
Anyone else had, I'm not going to say a similar experience, but a different experience?
Well, it's more a myth than a reality. I would definitely say that. When I started my practice, I started as a real estate lawyer because I was doing my job as a real estate lawyer. But gradually, I thought to move towards the immigration law. I was actually, discouraged that you're carrying a particular color of skin, so you won't be able to getting your cases decided in your favor by putting your arguments. And there is a discrimination. Skin that matters a lot. But honestly speaking, after like almost 2.5 years, and have lots of appearances for the refugee boards as well, I haven't yet experienced a single time any kind of discrimination which would have discouraged me and would have given those people a reason to reconvince them, anybody, like there is a discrimination. So it's kind of a myth that actually, I don't know where did it come from, but frankly speaking, I haven't seen any kind of discrimination.
And just to piggyback off of that, I also in court, I've never from the judiciary, from any clerks, I've never experienced any like other than I've been asked if I was an assistant, like with a senior associate, like, so it could be it's an age thing, like, but it wasn't from like a judge and or a clerk or opposing counsel or anything like that. So I do think I wouldn't worry too much about that if that's somebody's concern. I've never really experienced it.
Laura, go ahead.
I have another experience. This is something it's related to the topic, but on a positive note. When I was working downtown, and I applied for my articles at the region after. So I made good friends, right, when I was downtown. And I remember there was a particular young lawyer who came as a refugee from Europe, and he came as a teenager pretty much. So then he became a lawyer here in Canada. And so we kind of like connected it on the experience of, like coming from a different part of the world. And I asked him if he could write a reference letter for me so I could apply for my job at the region, and then later on for my articles. And then he gave me an excellent letter. I keep it in my computer because I was so touched by it. But I remember when he told me, I what area of law would you like to work in? And my passion is tort law. And he said, don't take this wrong, but you know that's a heavily oral practice, right? So you have to spend a lot of time in like an argument and oral arguments. And he said, that, given that English is not your first language, I just want you to be conscious about that. And I'm not saying that you will have a very hard time, but, maybe you want to consider other areas of law. And I said, okay, so it's a good comment. I don't think that he was saying, like you have a problem with the language, but I think that he was conscious because his first language wasn't English either. So just maybe speaking from his own personal experience, right? One is like some areas of law that are that are more, like documents and drafting, and maybe we can have better success than other areas. So I didn't take it as discrimination. I was very, I appreciated the comment, but that was also a good recommendation. I think it was a good tip. So it's just that.
Thank you for that. Thank you for the comment. So looks like we're up for time, and we didn't get to the segment that I did want to speak about, which was proposing changes and how to move forward. But I do hope to continue this conversation again in the near future. We have a third segment planned. I think we're going to move it. It's planned for next week, but I'm likely going to move it into December, where we'll talk about positive changes and what recommendations we can make for those positive changes. So thank you, everyone in the public, for tuning in today. But I especially want to thank the four of you, Alia, Laura, Kyla, and Zahid. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you could just stay online for a moment after we log off. But thank you again. I hope everybody learned something today and took something good away from this. And we hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.